the quiet collapse of the old collateral order, why gold came home, and how Treasury power could revalue it, cut the debt, and accumulate Bitcoin. For more than half a century, a large share of the world's sovereign gold did not sit in domestic vaults. It sat in New York and London inside the plumbing of the dollar system, quietly embedded in a web of leases, swaps, and collateral chains that underwrote the post-Bretton Woods financial order. That system is now being unwound. What mainstream commentary framed as confidence-building gold repatriation was, in reality, something far more structural, a global recall of collateral from the dollar-centric financial system itself. Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, Venezuela, others followed. They did not simply bring gold home. They allowed long-dated gold-backed contracts to mature, refused to repledge their metal into London and New York bullion markets, and demanded physical sovereign delivery. This marked the beginning of the end of the old collateral regime, and it sets the stage for what comes next. Gold was never just sitting there. When sovereign gold is held at the New York Fed or the Bank of England, it is rarely inert. Historically, that gold functioned as collateral for FX swap lines, backing for bullion bank leasing operations, balance sheet support for sovereign funding, a volatility suppressor in global precious metal markets, implicit structural ballast beneath the eurodollar system. The reason Germany's 2013 to 2017 repatriation took years and required extensive bar recasting is simple. Those bars had been working. They had been leased, swapped, rehypothecated, and embedded across interbank balance sheets for decades. You cannot instantly deliver collateral that is simultaneously pledged elsewhere. The same pattern appeared in Austria's extended London exit and Venezuela's later legal struggle to retrieve gold under sanctions. This was not fear. This was contract unwinding. The systemic signal the market ignored. By recalling gold, sovereigns were quietly declaring, "We no longer trust the counterparty web. We no longer want our reserves embedded in USD or EUR swap structures. We want our final settlement asset under our own legal jurisdiction." This transition marks the shift from globalized, leveraged collateral to nationalized, custody-secured reserves. This single change explains more about the post-2008 monetary regime than most rate models ever will. Why this matters for the United States right now. For decades, foreign gold stored at the New York Fed quietly strengthened U.S. monetary gravity. It supported FX swap architecture, bullion lending markets, structural reinforcement of dollar liquidity dominance. As that gold leaves, that invisible structural leverage shrinks. At the same time, U.S. debt has moved beyond $35 trillion, with no mathematical path back to balance through taxation or austerity alone. This is exactly where Treasury dominance replaces Fed dominance. The end of Fed illusions and the rise of Treasury power. The old regime centralized power in the Federal Reserve via interest rate control, balance sheet expansion, emergency liquidity facilities. The new regime centralizes power in the Treasury via tariffs, fiscal industrial policy, strategic reshoring, AI and data center infrastructure, sovereign balance sheet engineering. In this framework, the Fed becomes a liquidity technician, not the architect of the macro cycle. And this is where gold returns, not as a currency peg, but as a sovereign balance sheet weapon. The gold revaluation mechanism, the reset without default. The U.S. still carries its gold on the books at $42.22 per ounce, a statutory relic from 1973. In reality, gold trades above $2,000 per ounce. That means the United States is sitting on one of the largest unrealized balance sheet repricings in modern history. If Treasury remarks gold to market, the asset side of the national balance sheet instantly expands. Hundreds of billions, potentially over $1 trillion, of equity appears without issuing a single new bond. That equity can be used to retire outstanding debt, backstop long-duration Treasury issuance, capitalize industrial policy programs, absorb future digital reserve assets. This is not money printing. It is asset revaluation, and it is how sovereign balance sheet resets happen without formal default. The Trump administration's gold to Bitcoin signal. This is no longer theoretical. In early 2025, multiple outlets reported that officials from the Trump administration had floated a controversial plan to tap U.S. gold reserves to buy Bitcoin, describing the move as a budget-neutral strategy for building a national Bitcoin position. One senior advisor stated that the administration was exploring using profits from the nation's gold reserves to acquire Bitcoin rather than issuing new debt. At the same time, the White House formally established a strategic Bitcoin reserve and digital asset stockpile for seized crypto assets, the first official step toward sovereign-level digital reserve policy. This is the signal, not because the trade is imminent, but because the mental model has already shifted inside Treasury-level power circles. Why Bitcoin enters the equation at all. Gold stabilizes the past. Bitcoin captures reflexivity in the future. Once Treasury asserts balance sheet dominance and no longer depends exclusively on Fed liquidity tools, it gains the ability to hold Bitcoin as a strategic reserve volatility asset. Hedge fiat debasement structurally, not rhetorically. Signal participation in a neutral, non-sovereign monetary network. Attract global capital into U.S. digital settlement rails. The logic is not ideological. It is structural. Gold anchors credibility. Bitcoin captures exponential adoption. Treasury controls both ends of the monetary spectrum. Gold came home because the old system was ending. Repatriation was the first domino. It marked the breakdown of trust in rehypothecated collateral. It signaled the slow retreat from Fed-centric monetary dominance. It prefaced a world where fiscal power, not monetary purity, drives outcomes. Now the system needs a new anchor, not a gold standard, not a Bitcoin standard, not a Fed standard, but a Treasury-led balance sheet regime capable of repricing legacy assets, capitalizing AI and industrial policy, financing reshoring without currency collapse, absorbing digital reserve assets without destabilization. The new macro regime, in one line. Gold was recalled to end the old collateral lie. Treasury will reprice balance sheets to reset sovereign math. Bitcoin will be absorbed as the volatility engine of the digital reserve era. And the Fed will quietly fade from being the center of power. This is not chaos. This is controlled transition.